Okay, so have you seen this? Meta's Orion smart glasses. Everyone's saying they're going to be this huge GGE leap past smartphones, and honestly, some of the stuff they can do has me wondering if I'll ever take my phone out of my pocket again.
Yeah, it's definitely got people's attention, and for good reason. There's a really good article that came out in Artificial Intelligence. It was written by Srinidhi, Ranganathan, and they really get into the nitty-gritty of the tech behind Orion. It seems like Meta's really betting big on this whole idea that tech is just going to kind of blend seamlessly into our lives.
Well, and I follow all this tech stuff pretty closely, and this whole smart glasses thing isn't exactly new. I mean, we've seen other companies take a stab at it. What makes Orion different? Is this really the game changer they're making it out to be?
That's the million-dollar question, right? The article I mentioned, it highlights 4 big features that Meta's really pushing. And I think if we look at those and how they've learned from those past failures, that'll tell us a lot. So first up, we've got hands-free connectivity.
Okay, so picture this. You're walking down a street and boom, instead of digging out your phone to see who's texting, it just pops up right there in your vision. I mean, yeah, it's convenient, but is that really revolutionary?
Well, convenience is part of it, for sure. But what about how it could change how we interact with each other? Think about it. We're so used to just yanking out our phones almost without thinking about it that it kind of gets in the way of actually talking to people.
Yeah.
If Orion can give us a less intrusive way to stay connected, well, it could actually change how we communicate.
Oh, that's a good point. It's almost like Orion could encourage people to be more, present even when they're still plugged in.
Exactly. And that actually connects to another one of the big features.
Yeah.
Augmented reality integration. Instead of just dropping you into like a full-on virtual world, AR takes digital stuff and layers it over what you're actually seeing. The article gave a couple examples, like restaurant reviews just popping up as you walk by or getting directions right there on the street.
So it's like having a heads-up display for everyday life, which I gotta admit is kind of cool. But like beyond those examples, how practical is this really? What are the limits of AR when you're talking about using it like this?
That's where it gets really interesting. The article mentions that Orion uses AI and gesture recognition, which suggests it's a lot more sophisticated than those other smart glasses we've seen.
Okay, can you unpack that a bit? Like, how would AI make Orion's AR that much better?
All right, so imagine this. You're trying to put together one of those pieces of furniture that comes with like 1,000,000 steps. But with Orion, instead of struggling with that instruction manual, you could have those steps overlaid right on the pieces you're working with. Or think about like an architect that could be looking at a building site and actually see a 3D model of the building right there in front of them.
Wow, okay. That's definitely not just seeing restaurant reviews anymore. Makes me wonder just how powerful this AI really is. Is it like constantly learning and getting better based on what you're doing? Kind of like having a personal assistant that grows with you.
Well, that seems to be the goal for Meta. They keep talking about a future where technology just anticipates what you need without you having to tell it what to do all the time. And Orion, with the whole AI thing at its core, well, it's a pretty big step in that direction.
So we've got this crazy powerful AI and this super seamless AR, and it's starting to feel like the future is here. But the article also mentioned something about gesture and voice control. How does that all fit in?
Oh yeah, that's another area where Orion could really shake things up. Instead of always having to like touch a screen or use those clunky hand controllers, you could just use your voice and hand movements to control everything. The article doesn't really get into the nitty-gritty of how it all works, but it does say that Meta's been working on some pretty advanced hand tracking technology.
That makes me think about accessibility. Imagine someone who has trouble using their hands. They could finally interact with technology in a way that just feels more natural.
Exactly. And for people who rely on those assistive technologies, having a device that actually understands what they need without having to fiddle with a bunch of complicated menus, that could be huge.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, so we've talked about all these amazing possibilities, but it kind of begs the question, with all this AI and hands-free control, are we basically talking about Orion replacing our smartphones altogether?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the article, I got to say, it doesn't shy away from it at all. It actually lays out a pretty convincing case for how Orion could make our smartphones, a thing of the past.
All right, so convince me, how could glasses actually replace everything our phones can do?
Well, let's break it down. Think about what we use our smartphones for the most. Texting, calling, looking stuff up, watching videos, playing games, even like controlling things in our homes and at work. Orion, at least in theory, could handle all of that.
Okay, I can see how it would work for the first few things. Messaging, calls, using AR to find information when you're out and about. But what about things like watching videos or playing games. Don't you need a bigger screen for that kind of stuff?
Maybe, maybe not. Remember, technology is always changing. What we think is a big screen today might seem tiny in a few years. And as AR gets better and better, who knows? Maybe we'll be watching movies on what looks like a giant virtual screen right there in our living rooms. Or imagine playing a game that actually interacts with your real-world environment.
Okay, no, those are some pretty mind-blowing possibilities. But there's one big issue that we haven't really talked about yet, and it's a big one. Privacy. I mean, it's one thing to share stuff on social media knowing that you're putting that information out there, but it's a whole different ball game to have a device that's constantly recording everything you do, even if it's not like directly sharing it, you know?
Right, you hit the nail on the head. And that's where Meta's, history with user data, that's where it gets a little sticky. They've said they're going to have privacy features like little lights to show you when the camera's on and giving you more control over your data.
Yeah.
But will people actually trust them enough?
That's the big question, right? Especially these days with all the data breaches and, privacy scandals we hear about constantly. Do you think people are ready to accept that trade-off? Like, yeah, Orion's super convenient, but what are you giving up for that convenience?
It's tough to say, really. I think it comes down to how Meta handles all of this. They need to be upfront about how they're collecting and using our data. And they got to be proactive, not just waiting for another scandal to happen if they want to avoid the backlash other companies have faced.
Totally. This feels like it goes way beyond just technology. It's like we're having this philosophical debate about what kind of future we want. And speaking of the future, we haven't even talked about how Orion fits into that whole metaverse thing Meta's so obsessed with.
Oh man, that's where it gets really wild. Think of Orion like a bridge, okay? It connects the world we're in right now with that whole immersive digital world Meta keeps talking about. It's all about making those two worlds blend together seamlessly. So you're not just escaping into VR, you're actually making your everyday life better with it.
I get it. So instead of strapping on this big clunky headset and disappearing into a video game, Orion lets you see and interact with digital stuff right here in the real world. It's like something straight out of science fiction, but I gotta say, it's pretty exciting stuff.
It really is. Makes you think, though, what happens if Orion actually takes off? It is everywhere like smartphones are now. How will that change the way we live and work and talk to each other? What will our cities look like? Our homes? It's a future with a ton of potential, but there are also some big questions we need to answer, like about ethics and accessibility and even what reality really means.
It's a lot to think about, that's for sure. As we learn more about Orion, I'm really curious to see how all of this plays out. I have a feeling this is a conversation we'll be having again soon. Oh, absolutely. This is just the beginning. Technology is only going to get more advanced. The most important thing is that we keep talking about it and keep asking these tough questions.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you all to ponder the possibilities. This has been a fascinating look at Meta's Orion smart glasses. We want to hear from you. What do you think about all of this? Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep your eyes on the future.